This section addresses the alcoholic or drug-addicted family, which is where mental health therapists first learned about dysfunctional families. If someone is addicted to alcohol or drugs, they simply don't have time for the family unit. They're really focused elsewhere, and the chemicals impede them emotionally. Essentially, this person is an extremely immature person. They're addicted to a chemical, and they can't truly be there for the rest of the family. The result of this abandonment of the family is the codependent tends to become responsible for the family by default. They have to take over more of the functioning of the family on a continual basis. Gradually, they're the ones doing the major caregiving. They're the ones that are doing the budget. The alcoholic is more and more outside of the family unit, but the codependent is addicted to the alcoholic and is often much more concerned with the alcoholic than themselves or the rest of the family. They wonder whether they're drinking or whether they're not, whether they love them or whether they don't. The codependent is just as immature as the addict. These parents are two incredibly developmentally stuck individuals who are way too enmeshed, and what that causes, unfortunately, is a huge power vacuum in the family, where the parenting doesn't happen on the level that it should. This, in itself, is a form of love addiction. There are usually two sides to any person in a chemically dependent situation. On the one hand, an alcoholic is very immature, doesn't feel good enough, is angry, depressed, and scared, but on the outside often acts like everything is fine, can be very charming, and acts as if everything is fun and grand rather than difficult. They fool a lot of people into thinking that everything in the family is absolutely fine. On the inside, a codependent is often a person who does not feel good enough. They feel unloved, dependent, scared, extremely angry, and often feel like a martyr because they feel ripped off by the alcoholic, as if they somehow didn't choose them to be their mate. On the outside, however, the persona that they present to the world is somebody who is extremely loving and sweet. They will give you the shirt off their back. They are nurturing and forgiving. It is this dual personality that is so incredibly confusing to the children that live with them. These are two very young children who are stuck together in an enmeshed way, which causes a power vacuum that has to be fed somehow, and that is usually filled by the family hero. The family hero is a parentified child, a child that is put into a position where in some ways he or she is a peer with mom and dad. In many ways, the hero is taking care of mom and dad on an emotional level. At other times, they are looked at as just another kid by the parents, which is very confusing. Each position that the children fill serves a purpose for the family. The family hero's purpose is to show the family, and the outside world especially, that the parents must be doing something right. It is hard to believe a family is doing so poorly if a child like this, who is so together and responsible, came from that family. This child is the lieutenant of the family. All the children in chemically dependent families often act incredibly mature. They behave as if they are 40 when they're 10. It's the inverted parenting that's the hallmark of this disease in the family. Inside, the family hero feels ripped off. They feel a deep sense of doubt that they can't handle all the jobs that mom and dad are providing for them by their emotional absence. And that doesn't have to be outward jobs. It can simply be the feeling that they have to emotionally take care of mom and dad because of how immature they act. Inside, they're often angry and insecure and don't feel good enough. On the outside, they are super serious and very, very responsible. They behave as if they are terrifically competent. They get along with authority figures, but might have trouble getting along with peers. This person is essentially a codependent in training, and when he or she becomes an adult, the chances are they will themselves marry someone who is chemically addicted and start the whole family process all over again. The second child is usually the scapegoat. It is possible for the second-born to become the family hero and the firstborn to be the scapegoat, but usually it's the opposite way. The purpose of the scapegoat is to provide sufficient distraction so that no one in the family has time to talk about the drinking, because that would be too threatening to the primary marital relationship. If mom and dad fought about the drinking per se, they might wind up in divorce. This person becomes the symptom bearer for the family. They get in trouble at school, hit a baseball into a window, that sort of a thing. Therefore, the parents can fight over whether this is a bad kid or is this a misunderstood kid, which is a lot less threatening to the family unit. This child, the scapegoat, usually feels insecure and doesn't feel good enough about themselves. But on the outside, they present themselves as angry, a rebel. They get along with peers well, but fight with authority at every step. This person is an alcoholic or a drug addict in training. The third child is the lost child. The lost child is the one who is the chameleon in the family, the one who adjusts, and another one who acts in a codependent manner, but very often gets into addictive behavior as well later in life. They often develop an early pregnancy or a food disorder. They could also get into drugs and alcohol. The lost child tends to be very quiet. They look at what's happening with the first child in the family and they think to themselves, this job doesn't look like any fun at all. And when they look at the scapegoat position, they say, this person is getting killed out there and gets blamed for everything. What I think I'm going to do is be really quiet. I'm going to suck everything inside. I'm not going to get into any trouble. And I'm going to give people what they want to see and what they want to hear. I am going to adjust to the situation. I'm going to not make waves. But deep inside, the lost child feels angry, upset, depressed, and in general, simply not good enough. On the outside, they display perfect calm, sweetness and light, no problems, no strong opinions. They can handle anything. What this child provides for the family is another sense of the family looking normal and healthy. The fourth child will often take the mascot position. The mascot provides some humor to this otherwise tragic situation because these families are simply not fun. They are chaotic and they're crazy. There is so much intensity and shifting of alliances between all the members of this dysfunctional family that the family needs at least some sense of humor. But the humor is often negative and sarcastic, and usually at the expense of someone else, usually in the family. For some reason, everyone in the family allows this child to get away with it, which is often very different than the way the others are treated. The mascot inside also doesn't feel good enough, is very angry and feels insecure, but on the outside, everything is a joke. They get along with their peers, they don't get along with authority figures, but they're able to work with them and charm them. A mascot is another alcoholic or chemically dependent person in training. A mascot appears incredibly charming up until about the age of 30, and then they appear rather pathetic because they never really grow up. All the children, no matter their particular position, are stuck in an inverted parenting situation. They're not getting the kind of parenting they need or deserve. They have to take care of themselves emotionally. They often try to take care of their parents emotionally or more directly. This situation causes post-traumatic stress disorder, so that later on there is the flip side. When they're young, they're taking care of mom and dad and act overtly adult. When they're older, all their infantile needs rise to the surface, and they want to be taken care of by their partner, which is doomed to a relationship because it simply can't be done, and partners can't be parented and save the relationship. All the rules listed in the dysfunctional family video apply and were first discovered in these chemically dependent families. These families cause everyone in the system to become stilted. Everyone in the family displays stereotypic behavior. They want what is known because no one feels quite strong enough as an individual, and what is known are the strict rules within which they grew up. They feel and act like a cell in a multi-cell organism. The family is the individual, not each separate person. The family tends to label and define the children in too literal a fashion. So if the person who is the so-called stupid kid receives an A, then everyone is going to turn on them and say, "Boy, that was really lucky." It's good to see, though, but they'll laugh at them, essentially telling them to get back into their original position. It is critical to realize that they don't do this consciously. They really are trying to keep the family intact because that's the only way that people feel safe in that kind of environment. And that's what's so scary about them. It is possible for one person to have 2 or 3 of these different roles. If one person leaves the family, very often another person will take over their original role, but they won't necessarily give up the role that they had, which is really crazy making. Think of how a person can really manage to be a family hero and the bad kid all at the same time. All of the members of the family wind up feeling codependence because of the modeling of the main codependent and their excessive worry over their parents. In a very real sense, when a person grows up this way, they have to develop an addiction to something, whether that is to a chemical, work, or gambling. Underneath every addiction, there will be some codependence. And underneath any codependence will always be a personal developmental problem, a lack of individuation, a dysfunctional family, and problems with boundaries. The only possible way for people to really get better when they've grown up in this sort of family is to work through with a therapist the issues resulting from the dysfunctional family of origin system that they came from, and become whole in themselves before they can establish healthy relationships with any adults. Both the video on boundaries and dysfunctional families describe these dynamics in more detail.